Hello everyone, welcome to the JW Review. My name is Mike Felker, and this week we are looking at the September JW broadcast. We are going to be having a Watchtower study review, and if time permits, which I don't know if it will, we're going to be looking at the Enjoy Life publication and doing another review of that this week. So that would be 3 reviews in 1 week, and we'll see if that's even possible. We'll just see how it goes, but this JW broadcast was really something I felt compelled to respond to. I'm sure most of you have already watched this. And honestly, it's pretty cringy for me to watch. I don't know how you felt about it, but cringy really is the best way I can describe it. If I was going to be a little bit more bold, I would even say it's pretty culty. Because what do cults do when it comes to looking at information out there that opposes their beliefs? Well, usually you turn the other way, don't look at it, shun that information. That's kind of the sort of culty behavior I'm referring to. So where the leaders will say, listen to us, there's no skeletons in the closet, don't listen to those naysayers, just listen to us, right? So there's a whole lot of that in this broadcast, so I thought it would be so important to bring this up. And it's not like any of this is anything new, but we've always got new listeners, new audience members, so I think it's always just good to go through these things. And just for me, it's a little bit of a reality check. As someone who's not a Jehovah's Witness or an ex-Jehovah's Witness, it's a reality check for me, because it just reminds me that this sort of thinking is very much going on in the organization, and it does not seem to be getting any better. So if you are one of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you consider yourself to be a faithful witness, I really hope that you'll just hear me out here, okay? That you'll hear me out, you'll test what I say against the scriptures, and just listen. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I can have a respectful dialogue with you. We can talk about this stuff. We can do so in a friendly way, so you don't have to feel threatened by me. I'm not an apostate, so technically everything that Stephen Letts says in this would not be talking about me specifically, because I would not be considered an apostate. So I guess I'm in the clear as far as that goes. So, but anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. And I will say that the most cringy part about this is the application of it, which is where the dramatization happens. And that's where I was just practically squirming. That's the best way that I can describe it. It was just so painful to watch the dramatization. So let's go ahead and get into this.
The theme for this program is, as Jehovah's sheep reject the voice of strangers. It's estimated that there may be 15 million animal species on Earth today. But of all these animals, which one is most often used in the Bible to represent good people? Sheep. Jesus often used this illustration. Here are 3 examples. First, to his 12 apostles, he said at Matthew 10:16, I am sending you out as sheep among wolves. Second, regarding what he'll do shortly before Armageddon, he said at Matthew 25:32 and 33 that he will separate people one from another, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. In subsequent verses, he describes how the sheep will inherit everlasting life, but the goats will depart into everlasting destruction. Our third example, Jesus said at John 10:16, I have other sheep which are not of this fold. Those too I must bring in, and they will listen to my voice, and they will become one flock, one shepherd. But a question arises, why did Jesus use a sheep illustration to represent people who will gain everlasting life?
Okay, here's the first problem. He read Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, where Jesus says, Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. What's the problem there? There's more to that verse. Look at what else it says. So be shrewd as what? Serpents, and innocent as doves. So what Stephen Lett is doing here, he's taken this sheep illustration and applying that to Christians, which is right to do because Jesus is certainly doing that. But he leaves it there as if Christians are just these followers, these blind followers, like dumb sheep. Honestly, it's a little bit insulting because if all I got compared to was a sheep, if that's all it was, I'd be like, wow, sheep aren't very smart. It's like they kind of follow they kind of follow the shepherd rather blindly. I mean, they hear the voice and they go after, right? So there's that, but there's so much more to it, and I think it would have been so much more beneficial if Stephen Lett had read the rest of the passage, because we're also to be like serpents, not just like sheep. Because if you go out as a sheep in the midst of wolves, if you don't have that shrewdness before you, you're not going to have the wisdom, not even really the wisdom to follow the voice, because you can hear the sound of your shepherd, right? And you recognize his voice, but you've got to find a way to him. You've got to be able to navigate, right? And so shrewd as serpents and then innocent as doves. Okay, and look at the application that follows. Let's just kind of keep reading on here. But beware of men. Beware of men. So there's only one, really, that we need to be following, and that is our shepherd. As he read in John chapter 10, verse 16, which we'll read in a second, we follow the voice of our shepherd. We recognize his voice. But he also said, beware of men. Why? Because they will deliver you over to the courts and flog you in their synagogues. Who's that talking about? Well, in Jesus' day, he was talking about the religious leaders. I mean, notice Jesus isn't saying these things after Pentecost, right? After the resurrection and the church has already gotten started. No, this is Jesus kind of coming onto the scene here. And you've got all the religious leaders who really required very strict obedience to all of their rules and their traditions. So Jesus is saying, even to those who said, you got to follow us if you want to know Jehovah and you want to please Jehovah, you've got to follow us. But what does Jesus say? Beware of men, because basically they're going to betray you. It says, and you will even be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. Now look at verse 19. It says, but when they deliver you over, do not worry about how or what you are to say, for it will be given to you in that hour what you are to say. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of the Father who speaks in you. So notice here that Jesus doesn't say, when you go out in the midst of wolves, you just simply be silent, you ignore everything that's said, and then you just run away. That's not there at all. In fact, the opposite is there, because if you're just going to be a sheep, and that's all you are, and that's kind of the picture that Stephen Lett paints here, if you're just going to be a sheep, the moment you see any sense of danger, you just kind of turn around and go away. But no, the text said, be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. And why is that? Because you're going to be in the midst of these wolves, and you're going to be interacting with them. So be wise, be shrewd when you're doing that. And there's nothing in here about ignoring criticisms or things like that, which you're about to see as we continue on. And then he cites here John 10:16. Let me pull that up. John 10:16, and I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will hear my voice, that's Jesus' voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. Okay, and then you can even go back to verse 11 to get more context here, which we'll actually get into here in a second. So let's see what else Stephen Lett has to say.
Undoubtedly, because of the desirable qualities literal sheep have. They're gregarious, having a liking for companionship. They don't like to be alone. And it's a good thing, because without the flock and the protection of the shepherd, they're defenseless if a lion or bear approaches. About all they can do is bleat, "Bah." Goodbye, little sheep.
Yeah, so there's the problem. Christians aren't simply sheep, and this is really a pretty demeaning way to talk about Christians, that we are that way, that we're just a sheep. Because if that was the case, yeah, that's true. We're just kind of dumb, right? But we're not just sheep, and it's really demeaning, like he's talking down to us in this sort of way, which Jesus doesn't do.
Another good quality is that sheep as a whole tend to be peaceful, inoffensive, very different from goats. As little boys, my brother and I would pet the goats that my grandfather had. But if we turned our backs on them, one would often sneak up behind us and butt us for no reason. These are some of the desirable characteristics that make sheep an appropriate illustration for good people. But the quality we especially want to focus on is identified at John chapter 10, verses 4 and 5. When he, that is the shepherd, has brought all his own out, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers. So what's the desirable quality? Sheep listen to the voice of their shepherd and reject the voice of strangers.
Yeah, so when you go through the context, you have the shepherd, who is Jesus. And what is this talking about? Well, this is really ultimately talking about salvation, right? If you go down to verse 11 in John chapter 10, Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." And you get down to verse 16, where they hear his voice and they become one flock with one shepherd. All right, so this is all about listening to the voice of the shepherd. It has nothing to do with whether you listen to men or not. This is about who do you follow ultimately as your ultimate voice, the ultimate authority. Well, that's what Jesus is inviting us to do. Okay, and so the strangers in this case are the ones who are opposing Jesus, actively opposing Jesus. And in his day, that would be the false messiahs of his day, but more specifically, the ones that would have been related to his audience would be the religious leaders of his day. Again, don't follow them. These are just men, right, who are pointing you away from Jehovah. And Jesus is saying, follow me. Follow me. Not men. Beware of men. That's what Jesus says. Beware of men. But what Stephen Lett is going to tell us soon is actually to follow men. So he takes this whole principle about following the voice of the shepherd, and they parallel that to following the voice of the governing body, as if the governing body is that shepherd whose voice we must listen to.
Regarding this quality of sheep, the September 1st, 2004 Watchtower said this: A book on Bible lands relates that a visitor once claimed that sheep recognize their shepherd by his dress, not his voice. A shepherd answered that it was the voice they knew. To prove this, he exchanged clothing with a stranger. Dressed in the shepherd's garb, the stranger called the sheep, but they did not respond. They did not know his voice. Yet when the shepherd called them, though he was disguised, the sheep came at once. Please ask yourself, as one of Jehovah's figurative sheep, do I obediently respond to the voice of the fine shepherd and flee from the voice of strangers? Well, let's talk about this. The original stranger was Satan the devil. Like a ventriloquist, he made a serpent appear to talk, but the words were Satan's words. Satan thereby used his voice to slander Jehovah and deceive Eve. Today, Satan continues his work as an evil ventriloquist using not serpents, but human puppets to enunciate his voice, these acting as his agents, either wittingly or unwittingly.
So you can think about, by the way, when I pause this, it's just kind of a funny thing to point out. It's just no matter how you pause it, Stephen Led just has a face. He's a character. So that's not intentional that I paused it there, but no matter how you pause it or when you pause it, he's going to be making a pretty funny face. So just thought I'd point that out because you're all probably thinking it, just like I am. So back to the point at hand. So think about these strangers, as Stephen Lett is calling them, right? Well, Jesus has strangers in mind, but I think Stephen Lett is talking about something different. So think about all of the opposing voices to Jehovah's Witnesses. Think about them. Think about the loud. I mean, you could even think about me, right? So you can think about me. You could think about some other opposers or anti-Jehovah's Witnesses on YouTube or wherever. Are these ones actively, whether me or Lloyd Evans or someone like that, are we actively opposing Jehovah and Jesus Christ? Am I telling you to not listen to the voice of Jesus Christ? Do you, if you've been watching my podcast or videos for any length of time, have you ever heard me say anything remotely to the effect of don't follow the voice of Jesus Christ? I mean, I think if anyone who's been watching this honestly would say that's kind of a ridiculous question to even ask, because I tell you time and time and time and time again to follow the scriptures, to listen to Jesus Christ and test the words of men up against what the scriptures have to say. I even tell you to test my words up against what the scriptures have to say, right? But you can even look at someone like a Lloyd Evans, and while Lloyd Evans will in one breath criticize the Watchtower, in another breath criticize the scriptures. I mean, I've listened to a lot of Lloyd Evans. I've never heard him say, don't be a Christian or don't follow Jesus Christ. I've never heard him say those things. Now, it might be that if you follow along with Lloyd Evans, you might eventually go down that road to secularism or atheism. But even so, I don't think it's Lloyd Evans' intention to get you to not be a Christian. I don't think that's what he's trying to do. I could be wrong. Share with me your thoughts on that if you think I have the wrong assessment there. But by and large, I don't think that's what the opposers are trying to do, to get you to not follow Jesus Christ. They're basically just sharing the information. Now, they probably don't want you to be a Jehovah's Witness. That's another issue. But I'm talking about following Jesus Christ, being a Christian, which a Christian is a follower of Jesus Christ, regardless of what denomination or subgroup you're going into. I don't think they're saying that, and I'm certainly not saying that. So I guess I can only speak for myself, but that's just my impression. So when you think about Satan having these these puppet strings, right? Trying to get people to oppose Jehovah and oppose religion. I actually don't think that's people like the anti-Jehovah's Witnesses online or things like that. I don't think it's them at all, right? I don't think it's them at all. I think it's largely just secularism at large. That's really what's ultimately opposing Jehovah and Jesus Christ, is just secularism. Okay, so I think that is actually the greatest threat.
But now let's discuss 3 examples of how our fine shepherd tells us one thing, but Satan's underlings or strangers tell us something opposite. We must be vigilant to listen to the right voice. Our fine shepherd tells us, as our first example, these words at Matthew chapter 24, verses 45 through 47.
So notice he said to listen to the right voice. Listen to the right voice. The right voice is Jesus Christ. All right, so this is all about this, up until this point, this is all about following Jesus Christ, following the right voice, being like a sheep and listening and not being deceived by a stranger, right? So up to that point, that's been what has been said. But now look what he does. This very subtle shift to listening to the voice of men. So he makes this subtle shift, intentionally or not, whatever, equating the voice of men to the voice of Jesus Christ. There's no, I don't see another way to see this. That's what he's doing here. Otherwise, why would he go to Matthew 24:45, which they take it to be about obeying the governing body? Why even go there? Why not just leave it at listening to Jesus Christ versus the voice of the stranger? Why not leave it there? Well, for a Jehovah's Witness, that's just not good enough, right? It can't just be about listening to the voice of God or listening to the voice of Jesus Christ. No, you've got to have the voice of men in there. You can't leave that out because it's integral to this religion. So look at what he says.
Who really is the faithful and discreet slave whom his master appointed over his domestics to give them their food at the proper time? Happy is that slave if his master on coming finds him doing so. Truly I say to you, he will appoint him over all his belongings. We know the Master Jesus found the faithful and discreet slave spiritually feeding right-hearted ones in 1919.
Yeah, so this is where we can start to really test the voice of men. Because what did Jesus say? We're still in the book of Matthew. Jesus said, Matthew 7:15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. He just brought up 1919. And he brought up this whole idea of the faithful and discreet slave. Because the Watchtower's viewpoint is that the faithful and discreet slave was chosen by Jesus Christ in 1919. Now, what were they teaching in 1919? Crack open the finished mystery. You probably don't have the physical copy. If you want a copy of it electronically, let me know. I would be glad to share it with you because that book was being widely circulated in 1919 and the years following. A lot of that book would be rejected utterly by Jehovah's Witnesses today. It has things in that book that they would now be considered false. And what were they also teaching around those years, in like the years following 1919? What were they teaching would happen in 1925? That the prophets of old would be resurrected, right? Weren't they teaching that this would happen in 1925? What does Jesus say? Beware of false prophets who will come to you in sheep's clothing. Interesting. So since 1919, they've been the faithful and discreet slave. Go back to Matthew 24:45 and check this out again. Jesus is asking the question, who then is the faithful and prudent slave? Who then is it? So Jesus is not answering the question right away. So who is the faithful and prudent slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them food at the proper time? So in other words, who is this faithful slave that gives food at the proper time? Well, the only answer to that is verse 46. Blessed is that slave whom his master finds doing so when he comes. The faithfulness is not determined and cannot be determined until the master comes. Otherwise, the parable doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, look at what else the passage says. Verse 48, but if that evil slave says in his heart, my master is not coming for a long time, and begins to beat his fellow slaves and eat and drink with drunkards, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour which he does not know, and will cut him into pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So you have a faithful slave and an evil slave. If the slave is determined faithful from the outset, and this is talking about a class, remember, the Watchtower said this is a composite slave, this is a class, this is not talking about an individual. If Jesus is determining right off the bat that this is the faithful slave, then there is no evil slave to be had. Because the slave's already been determined faithful from the outset. The parable makes no sense whatsoever in the Watchtower's viewpoint. But if you look at verse 46, blessed is that slave whom his master finds doing so. What is the doing so? The doing so is giving food at the proper time. So that slave is faithful at that time. And yet there could still be evil slaves out there, because this is not talking about a composite slave, a class. This is talking about individuals and their faithfulness in doing what God has instructed them to do. So you're going to have faithful slaves and you're going to have evil slaves. And it's not determined until the master comes, and the master has not had his final coming yet. So until then, we are to beware. We are to examine what men say and compare it to what the scriptures teach. We're not to look at any man right now and say, yep, that is the faithful slave. I'm going to believe everything that they say. Jesus nowhere commanded that. It's not in the parable, but yet the Watchtower reads that into it.
And at a future time will appoint him over all his belongings. So what's the implication? Obviously, even now, Jesus fully trusts the faithful slave.
So the master puts the slave in charge, okay? But what the Watchtower is saying, Jesus trusts this governing body exclusively. The Watchtower governing body, that is, trusts them exclusively to do what Jehovah's Witnesses say they do. But none of that is in the text. None of that is in Matthew 24:45. This is a parable about just being faithful to God with what He has charged all of us with. There's nothing in there about the slaves telling other people, you've got to trust me, as if you're trusting Jehovah, as if there's a parallel there. That sounds more like the evil slave who's giving false warnings. Because look at what the evil slave says. My master's not coming for a long time. Now the opposite could be true. The slave could be prematurely declaring that the master is coming to kind of instill a trust. The master's coming soon. You better trust us. I mean, Stephen Lett's going to say it in this very broadcast. We're in the final part of the last days. He's going to say that. And that's what this slave has been saying for years. And even being dead wrong about it and having to shift and move and change their doctrine. So really, why should I trust this particular slave? We're not given any reason to do so.
And all of us, even individual members of the governing body, should do the same. But what does the voice of strangers say on this subject? Don't trust the faithful slave. He will mislead you. And who often have the loudest voice promoting this false message? Apostates. Hebrews 13:9 labels false messages as strange teachings. Yes, they are the teachings of strangers. Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects pedophiles.
Oh, there he said it. So you would think that if he mentions this, he's talking about the voice of strangers, he's talking about false teachings, and we're all just kind of sitting at the edge of our seat. We're just wondering, well, okay, what are these false teachings? Please do tell us, and please show us why they're actually wrong. Let's see if he actually does that.
Or that slave will exploit you so they can live lives of luxury. Those are both bald-faced lies.
So the way you refute an accusation, he just mentioned the pedophiles, then he mentioned the ones about living in luxury, but we're going to put that one to the side for now. Let's just look at the whole topic of the pedophiles. Very, very serious topic. I hope you would all agree. I hope if you're a faithful Jehovah's Witness, you would certainly agree. When you hear a charge like this, that is putting the well-being of children at stake, something that will ruin a child's life, really, something so serious as that. Look at what he just said. He just said, those are lies, without elaborating at all. Without actually saying what the charges are. He's sweeping this under the rug. And that's just what they've been doing on this topic, not answering the actual charges. Now, they are having to go to court and answer for this, and they had to do that at the Australian Royal Commission. But they're hoping you don't look at any of that. They're hoping you don't click on the link that someone shares with you that's saying that children's lives are in danger. They're just saying, don't click on that link, don't look at that paper, don't look at any of that. He's just saying, dismiss them as lies about protecting pedophiles. If there's even the slightest chance that the opposers are right about that, then it's worth investigating if just one child's life could be saved by putting one more pedophile behind bars. Because if more Jehovah's Witnesses took this charge seriously and began to feel that they are at liberty and they should report suspicions of pedophilia in sexual abuse, especially child sexual abuse, then maybe some people could be saved from this. So who's the ones really protecting pedophiles? The one who says, hey, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of investigations happening. We really need to investigate this stuff. That person, or the one who says, nope, those are all just lies. Don't look at those. Turn the other way. Which side is the ones protecting pedophiles in that case?
Acts 20:30 says that apostates speak twisted things. They do this in order to draw God's sheep away and make them followers of themselves. Something that's twisted is bent out of shape or distorted. They speak twisted things by leaving out vital details.
Can you give us an example, please? I mean, they always do this. They always talk about the twisting, the lies, and whatnot, but we don't have any details. This is that kind of culty talk that I was describing at the beginning, to where you can describe very, very loosely and vaguely kind of what's happening out there, just enough for you to know, okay, well, they're in tune with it, right? And that's just enough for you to say, okay, well, I'm trusting in these men, right? They've already looked into it. They've already determined that it's a lie, and I'm going to trust in them because Jesus trusts in them.
Taking things out of context, or in some other way, manipulating a truth into a lie, or into a misleading half-truth. 2 Peter 2:3 says, they will greedily exploit you with counterfeit words.
So why is the governing body exempt from all of this? Why? On what basis? Well, their only basis is that Jesus trusts in the faithful slave, which we already showed is not how Matthew 24:45 works. You're not to trust in any men in this way. I mean, Jesus said to beware. To beware. Test all things. Right? Be like the Bereans. Examine the scriptures to see if what they say is really so.
A counterfeit is something that's carefully designed to look like the real thing. Take, for example, counterfeit money. It might look genuine, but it's fake and thus worthless. If we're deceived into accepting it, we'll lose money. But if we're deceived into accepting the counterfeit words of apostates, we'll lose our life.
So take this seriously, because what if these are the counterfeits? The man on the screen right here. What if they are the counterfeits? And why can't that be true? Why? On what biblical basis could it not be true that these governing body members are the counterfeits, or this whole JW religion is the counterfeits? Because if you're just following them practically blindly, and you've got your blinders on, and you're turning away from all information, shooing it away, sweeping it under the rug, if you do that, how will you know if this is actually a counterfeit religion? Now, you may say that back in your early days of becoming a witness, you did your investigation and you determined that this is the only true religion and all of that. Okay. Well, back in the old days, the days of Israel, right, the leadership a lot of times would leave Jehovah and start to worship idols. And you can imagine in those days, let's say you were a Gentile convert into Judaism, right? You did all your investigation. You found out that, okay, this Jewish religion, this is it right here. And you've got the high priest, you've got the leadership, and you're following along. You're being obedient. You have the scriptures. And then slowly but surely, because apostasy doesn't just happen instantly, right? It's usually a gradual thing. So before you know it, these these leaders that you once trusted in, they're now sacrificing to Baal, right? And these other pagan deities. But you went right along with it because you had your blinders on and you weren't listening to anyone else who said, hey, don't follow them. These guys are going off on the wrong path. Don't follow after them. No, but you said, no, those are the voice of the strangers. I'm not listening to them. So if that could happen back then, why can't it happen now? Why can't it happen now with this religion and these governing body members? If you go back to Matthew 24:45, you read it carefully. Or actually, better yet, go to the Luke passage. Go to the Luke passage in Luke 12, verse 42. Who then is the faithful and prudent steward, who his master will put in charge of his servants to give them their rations at the proper time? Blessed is that slave, whom his master finds so when he comes. Truly I say to you, that he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that slave says in his heart, my master will be a long time in coming, and begins to beat the male and female servants, and to eat and drink and get drunk, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect, and at an hour he does not know, will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. Look at these following verses. Look at it carefully. And that slave who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accord with his will receive many beatings. So you have one slave that gets full punishment, another slave that gets many beatings or lashes. In verse 48, but the one who did not know it and committed deeds worthy of a beating will receive but a few. That's a third one. So if the Jehovah's Witnesses are right, the governing body can't be any of these other ones but the faithful one. But why? I mean, Jesus thinks there's going to be other ones, less faithful ones, some very wicked ones. So if that's good enough for Jesus, why is that not good enough for you?
And apostates will give us absolutely nothing of value in exchange. Can you imagine really needing a loving shepherding visit and asking apostates to give you one?
I'm sorry, that's a really, really dumb example. That's a really dumb example. But let's just paint it in a different light. Let's say you have been shunned by all of your friends and family. No one will speak to you. You're lonely, and maybe you're even contemplating suicide. I mean, that happens, right? That certainly happens. Severe depression. And what if the only one who will listen to you or come to you for a shepherding call is an ex-Jehovah's Witness who has found Jesus Christ? And they come to you and they show you the story of the prodigal son. And how the son, when he came back, didn't continue to get shunned. Right? For this intermediary period. Like you're in this some kind of purgatory, kind of waiting to get out. No, the prodigal son goes. And he is celebrated upon his return, even at a distance. But that's all about Jesus Christ accepting you. Right? And celebrating you. And I would hope something like that would be an encouragement. That's not all I would say, but I'm just trying to use an example. Something that would be comforting. So yeah. I think in some cases, it would be great to call an apostate XJW who knows Jesus Christ for a shepherding call. because I think they give you a lot more truth and loving counsel than your elders, who just want you to continue to be shunned until you come back. And then you just have this waiting period in the congregation, weeks or months, where you continue to get shunned. So yeah, I think in a lot of cases it would be better to call an apostate.
Similarly, we must be careful about believing everything presented in the media about Jehovah's organization. Remember, the media is commonly motivated by prejudice, hatred, and a desire for profit. False and exaggerated news reports are very common. For example, in one European country, many people were indignant when an emotional press report stated that a young female witness died because she refused a blood transfusion. Were those the complete facts? No. The patient refused a blood transfusion on religious grounds, but she did agree to alternative non-blood medical management. This could have been implemented immediately and likely would have saved her life. However, the hospital delayed matters unnecessarily until it was too late. The press report didn't mention these facts.
So first of all, we don't have a source, and this is so common, and it's really, really frustrating to not have any kind of sources where you can actually go and check this out. And it's not like any representative of the Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be able to sit down with the doctors and have a real published report where both sides can interact and dispel whatever myths. There's no open dialogue that's going to happen here, right? But nonetheless, I don't think he wants you. He doesn't cite the source here. That tells me he doesn't actually want you to go and do your own investigation. And he says it's very likely that if she would have been given these alternative transfusion methods, where it'd be a bloodless surgery, right? Then very likely this person would have been safe. But are we just supposed to take Stephen Lett's word for it? How do we know that? Because if that was really the case, there's probably some lawyers that would love to have that case, right? And that's why I'd like to actually look into this. Because heck, I mean, if this was me and this happened, I would be suing if the hospital was dragging their feet and wouldn't honor my request. Lawsuit, lawsuit, lawsuit. But we don't know. We don't know what this report is. If you know, I'd love to see it, right? But he doesn't actually want you to investigate this. He just wants you to take his word for it.
While it's unreasonable to distrust all secular sources of information, we must be wary. 1 John 5:19 says, "The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one." Now, let's discuss a second example of the voice of our fine shepherd Jesus.
Okay, we're going to skip the second example, and then and we're going to go straight over to the last example.
Ourselves and others. But now, our third example of the voice of our fine shepherd is at Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to read verses 19 and 20. "Stop storing up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. Rather, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal." We're told that our focus should be on spiritual things and not on physical things. And this is especially true when thinking about where we are in the stream of time, in the final part of the last days.
Oh, there he said it. There he said it. I told you he was going to say it. The final part of the final part of the last days. So let me just go back. Actually, we're at Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. So, if you just skip down through a couple of verses, down to verse 15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. Beware of them. And what I'm going to tell you is beware of men who say things that are not biblical, that we're in the final part of the last days. Jesus says we don't know the day or the hour, right? If you don't know the day or the hour, why are you trying to make it seem like you kind of do, to where you can just narrow it down to this very specific window of time, right? But look at how the application is made. Let me go back to the verse here. 6:19, storing up treasures on earth. Look at how he takes this and applies this to the last days.
But what's the voice of strangers of this world on this subject? Exert yourself vigorously to acquire material possessions. Pursue things that will make your life comfortable, because that is what will bring you happiness. The question is, to whom are we listening? Jehovah and Jesus tell us to be content now with a spiritual paradise, and to concentrate on our life-saving preaching work, and that they will provide a physical paradise later. 1 Peter 2:11 indicates that we should view ourselves as temporary residents who are just passing through this old system and headed for the real life in the new world. What?
Yeah, that verse says, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from fleshly lusts, which wage war against the soul, by keeping your conduct excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good works, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation." So I don't really see the application that he's making here, but what I will say is that, yeah, I agree, don't make your life all about material pursuits, because those things are going to wither away. But notice what he says here, where he shifts it to not just don't pursue material things and making money your master or anything like that. No. Us being in this final part of the last days, you need to look at all of your spending and everything that you do in light of that reality. So it's not just don't be materialistic. It's not just don't be materialistic. Be careful about even putting your money in investments or buying a new home, because the end might come soon and you just wasted your time doing that when you could have been spending your money and your time on kingdom interest. Now, he doesn't say that here exactly, but that's really the implication. If you just rewind and go back to the late 60s and early 70s, Jehovah's Witnesses were being commended by selling their homes and things like that and making these rash decisions that really affected their lives negatively, because 1975 came and went. So this whole attitude is nothing new. I mean, just short of claiming a specific date, he's basically going to be saying that, yeah, kind of think about doing the same things they were doing in the late 60s and early 70s, watching your spending and doing things, because, this is all going to be over and done with, right? Look at what he says.
What do we mean by temporary resident? Well, imagine that you rent an old house to live in while a new, beautiful house is being built for you. You'll live there only a few months. Would you install a new concrete driveway? Would you put in new electrical wiring and plumbing? Would you install brand new vinyl siding? No.
So you see, he's basically saying it, right? If we really are in the final part of the last of the final part of the last of the last of the last days, would you really be doing all of this stuff? Would you really be buying that car? Would you really be taking on a new mortgage? Would you really be putting your money into a 401k? Right? Just doing the basic things that aren't materialistic. It's just being a responsible adult and taking care of your family. There's a wrong way to do it to where you're pursuing material things, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about taking care of your family and being a responsible adult and honoring God with your money. But he's saying here is that, would you do all this stuff if you just had a few months left? He's just putting this into your minds.
You might do a few cosmetic things to make your stay a little more comfortable, but you wouldn't do anything major. Why? Because you know you're just a temporary resident, and that soon you'll move into your beautiful new home. Well, if we think of ourselves just as temporary residents in this old system, it'll be a real protection against the materialism that is promoted by the voice of strangers.
Yeah, and so you can see how following these men can really affect your life very, very negatively. I mean, seriously, go back and look at the things that were said in the late 60s and early 70s. And I've talked to people who were in that predicament that made very rash decisions because the end was happening soon. And these decisions really affect them the rest of their lives. Because in the late 60s and early 70s, the end didn't come soon. I mean, if it's soon now, it definitely wasn't soon back then because we're decades later. So don't buy into this, that what he's saying, it's not biblical, okay? It's not biblical that we're in the final part of the last of the final part of the last days. It's not biblical.
We've now discussed 3 examples of Jesus' voice.
Okay, so now we are going to go to the dramatization. And this is probably the most painful part. So this dramatization is basically showing you an example of a mother and daughter and their relationship. And this actually surprised me because from what I've seen from Jehovah's Witnesses, now I'm not talking about apostates and things like that, but what I've seen from Jehovah's Witnesses is that when close family are trying to bring things to their attention, they're actively engaging with it. Like when family members oppose them, right? They're trying to engage the opposition, to answer the arguments and offer reasons in return. I've witnessed that, and I've seen that, kind of as an outsider, but I've known people in that kind of position, right? So this dramatization actually surprised me. And this is where it was so cringy to me to see this. To see this close-mindedness that they're advocating here to your own mother. To your own mother. And I just want you to think about it this way. Who was being the more open-minded one in this relationship, the mother or the daughter? Who was being more open-minded, more willing to engage, more willing to look at information? Which one? Which one was it? And also think about the attitude of the mother. I mean, the mother is practically whispering in gentleness. I mean, she is such a gentle person. She's not being belligerent or hateful. Yeah, she might be, the daughter's clearly annoyed. But the thing is, the daughter's annoyance in this It's like it's being commended. It's like the daughter's attitude throughout all this is being commended. So check this out. I'll offer some commentary throughout, but just think about some of these things as we watch it. And there's Stephen Lett making another funny face.
Sensitive situation.
Amen.
It smells wonderful.
Oh, wait, I forgot.
You should cook every night.
If you clean every night.
No, we'll take it in turns.
Ta-da!
But this looks amazing.
Thanks. It's a practice for my first guest.
Really? Who?
My mum.
That's wonderful.
We had our first phone call in a year that wasn't a total disaster, so I invited her around tomorrow.
Okay, so let me just set the stage and try to be as fair as I can. So she says she's had her first call in a year that hasn't been a total disaster. So you're kind of thinking at this point, oh my gosh, like, this girl, she seems nice. She seems really sweet. But it sounds like the mother is this like, this belligerent kind of mean person to where she seems dreadful. Right? So that's how she's describing her mom so far.
It'll go great.
Hi, Mum.
Hello, love.
Come in. Nice to see you. Nice to see you too. Let me take that. Oh, thanks, my love. It's fine.
Your roommates, you say they're explorers?
Pioneers. They preach full-time, but they work part-time.
I see. But you're not...
No, not yet anyway.
Jade, love. All this. I see it's made you a better person. Heaven knows I tried. But I miss bits of the old Jade.
Bits? What bits?
Where's the Jade that questioned everything?
So you see there, where's the Jade that questioned everything? So clearly Jade has stopped questioning. And so she sounds like she's, okay, yeah, I don't question anything anymore. Well, why not? Why stop questioning things? Why? They don't really tell us, but there you see it. And here's where you see the close-mindedness starting to happen.
So then she pulls out her phone and starts showing me stuff about witnesses.
What kind of stuff?
News stories, all negative and slanted. I tried to change the subject, but she just kept at it.
See you later, girls.
Yeah, okay, so she's sharing with her information, and you can imagine she's sharing with her things that are about pedophilia. Maybe she found stuff about the Australian Royal Commission. Maybe she wanted to show her that, hey, I've got this video of an actual governing body member being questioned, and you can watch you can watch this video. Maybe she was showing her those things, but it's like, oh no, this person is showing me negative things about my beliefs, and they're I mean, as a Jehovah's Witness, honestly, I thought you have, I'm not trying to be insulting, but I thought you have thicker skin than this. That you're like afraid of it? Okay, maybe you're annoyed by it. Okay. But if you're shown the negative information, see, if you're going to show me negative information about my beliefs, the best way for me to get you to stop doing that would be for me to refute those things that you're showing me. Show you how they're false, because if I show you that they're false, well, you're probably not going to bring those up, right? So they're basically advocating having thin skin and getting annoyed by people bringing information that's negative about you. I mean, you don't see any of this kind of attitude as you read through the Christian scriptures. Nothing like it at all. The early followers of Jesus Christ faced it head on. They were bold and they were courageous. One of my favorite scriptures in this regard, 2 Corinthians 10:3-5. Paul says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the tearing down of strongholds." Here's my favorite part. "As we tear down speculations and every lofty thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ." That's the boldness that I hope to emulate. That if I see something that's brought to my attention and it's false, I want to tear it down and take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Because in Jesus hold all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. That's Colossians chapter 2. So where is this in this whole dramatization? This dramatization doesn't say face it like Paul is saying to face it here. The dramatization is advocating turn away, ignore it, put it away, turn it away, get annoyed by it, right? I mean, that's what this dramatization seems to be advocating.
Bye.
Keisha.
Sorry, I gotta get ready.
Yep, there's another example, another link. Put it away, don't look at it, right? And she's not being belligerent. I haven't found any indication that the mom's being belligerent. Really, no, she seems to be very nice and loving and kind.
Well, how long are you going to be gone for?
I'll stay another month. I told my daughter it's too hot here. What's happened to me?
Abigail?
Jade girl, how are you?
Been better.
Oh, Nita said that your mother visited.
I hope you don't mind.
No. Mum's driving me mad. It's like it's her hobby to ruin my life.
Oh.
I mean, exaggeration much? I mean, it's her hobby to ruin her life by sharing information in a very kind and loving way? Yeah, overreaction there, I think.
She sounds wonderful. Like me when my daughter got baptized.
You opposed your daughter?
Oh, mercy, yes. I love her so much and didn't want to lose her.
But I'm not going anywhere.
Of course not, but a worried mother doesn't know that.
Mother, lunch is ready.
I got to go, but I have a scripture for you. When you read it, remember, Your mum is not the stranger.
John chapter 10 and verse 5. They will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, because they do not know the voice of strangers. Mum is not the stranger. It's what she shares. Reject the voice, not her.
Did you look at those?
Yeah, so reject the voice, but not her. So reject what she's saying, but not her. But she's already been rejecting what she's saying. Right? She's already been rejecting what she's saying. And that's really what Stephen Lett has been saying all along, is just reject what is said.
Things that I sent you.
Mum, I want us to get together, but I won't hear anything negative about my beliefs.
I won't. Okay, so this is after her realization, after she's gotten the encouragement. She's telling her kind and loving mother, and this could be a different situation where you have a kind and loving friend, I won't hear anything negative about my beliefs. That's like I'm plugging my ears up. Is this how a Christian is supposed to respond? Let me show you a passage that I'm sure you're all familiar with. 1 Peter 3:15. But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, that's Jesus, always being ready to make a defense, to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and fear. That could also be translated as respect. Having a good conscience, so that in the thing in which you are slandered, so we're talking about, this isn't talking even just about a loving context, right? This could be the context of you getting slandered. But those who disparage your good conduct in Christ will be put to shame. So what this is telling you is that even in the case of slander, to respectfully and gently make your case and refute it in hopes that your good conduct will put this person to shame. So this girl is not following this here. She's literally saying, plug your ears up and don't listen to anything negative about your faith. You see why I'm surprised by that is because Jehovah's Witnesses have been taught to take it, to have thick skin, and to be able to address the arguments. Maybe that's changing now.
Well, perhaps we just won't talk religion.
It's a deal then?
All right then. I can see.
So she just made a deal? The daughter agreed. Make a deal to not talk about religion. So the daughter didn't even set up any terms. The daughter agreed that we're not going to talk religion. Is that what they're telling you to do? This whole thing is utterly confusing in light of what I thought I knew about Jehovah's Witnesses.
I'm not going to get anywhere. So what subject do you want to talk about?
The deal fell apart fast.
Jade, I know we weren't going to talk religion, but I must tell you this one thing that
Mum,
I read.
I thought we weren't going to talk about this.
I mean, she's like, I got this one thing. This could be the most incriminating piece of information imaginable. I mean, this actually makes me think about, I don't know if some of you have watched it, the Warren Jeff documentaries. There's 2 of them on Netflix. So Warren Jeffs ended up in prison. I mean, a terrible, terrible man. the things he did to women. I mean, I would encourage you to watch it. It actually reminds me in a lot of ways, minus all the polygamy, right? Minus all of that. I'm more talking about a lot of the mentalities involved. But Warren Jeffs went to prison, and I kind of was thinking, oh, well, he's gone to prison, right? This has all been proven, this has all been settled, but no. The religion still moves on. Why? Because people are saying, don't listen to the apostates, don't listen to the opposers. Yet if you wanted to go to some of these families that are being led astray by Warren Jeffs, you could say, look, I have this information I really want you to see. I know you're not going to like it, but there's things about Warren Jeffs that you really need to know. I really hope you'll hear me out and consider this information. If those people on the other end are like Jade here, they're going to say, no, I don't want to hear anything negative about my religion. Nope, put it away. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear it. It's all apostate lies. But this could be very important information, right? Because what's still happening in that group, Warren Jeffs' group, is that women are still being abused. It's very, very important stuff. In the Jehovah's Witness organization, pedophiles could be getting protected, and children could be getting sexually abused. There's information that really needs to get out there, but they're just being dismissed as apostate lies.
It's getting late. I'm gonna go. Thanks for dinner. I'll call you tomorrow.
Jade, I got an alert this morning and I'm really
Mum,
worried about this.
No, I don't.
I was sure this wouldn't work. And then it happened.
Jade, I'd like to change our agreement. If I ask you what you believe, you get to answer. Short answers, I won't be converting. It's a deal then?
Yeah, it's a deal.
So that's the end of the dramatization, and so the deal was she can ask her questions and she can answer. That's a little bit vague in my opinion, because what if it's, hey, here's this information, can you share with me what you think about it? So the terms that were set are still very vague. I don't think realistically those terms are going to solve anything, because the terms are, if you ask what she believes, she can answer. I don't see how that gets it anywhere. So to boil this down, you saw that this mom, and I actually, in a sense, I really do appreciate that they use someone that is not belligerent and rude and nasty, because a lot of other times they do show examples to where, I'm trying to think if it was in the convention, they were showing where a guy was doing his witness card, and these people came and just took the literature, threw it on the ground, and they're just being so rude and nasty. I can appreciate, to just give something positive out of all of this, that they put someone here who's very gentle and kind, not rude and nasty, and is trying to politely share information that she thinks will help her daughter. Her intentions seem good, right? Her intentions seem good. She actually cares about her daughter. So I can appreciate that. So what biblical reason, show me, what biblical reason does Jade have to turning the other way and not looking at the information that the mother is providing her in a way to to show her how that information is wrong. Weren't given a reason, right? Weren't given a reason. So, a very cringy thing to watch, maybe even disturbing. So, we're going to wrap it up there. This was a long one. I didn't realize I would actually be going this long, an hour and 20 minutes. So I would love to hear your thoughts. What did you think about all of this? I'd love to hear your comments. So is there something I missed? Is there something that you disagreed with, or something that you can offer more insight on? I'd love to hear from you. So please go down to the comment section below. Share your thoughts there. Interact with others. I love it. I'm always encouraged by all of it. If you want to contact me privately, just go down to the show notes or the video description. There's a number of ways for you to contact me privately, whether it's through email. We can talk on the phone, text, WhatsApp, Skype. However you want to talk, I am here to talk to you. I realize a lot of you can't post anything publicly, but you do contact me privately, and I really, really do appreciate that. You all know who you are. If you want to support this work, best ways for you to do that is to hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to this channel. That really does help get the algorithm out. Before, we were talking about secular channels on YouTube, talking about Jehovah's Witnesses. Please consider promoting channels like this that are really trying to promote the truth of God's Word, and in particular, the love of Jesus Christ and His death in behalf of His people, the gospel, the good news of the kingdom, all of that. That's what we're trying to promote here. So please promote channels like this that are doing that. Another way for you to support this is to share this content. And then if you have the means to support this financially, you can go down to the description, and there's a link for Patreon to become a monthly supporter, which helps to keep the lights on and get some of the basic costs covered. So I'm going to leave it at that. Hopefully we'll have another review this week, looking at this week's Watchtower Study Edition, and if time permits, Lesson 2 in the Enjoy Life publication. So with that, we'll see you next time. Have a great week. For more information about Jehovah's Witnesses and other topics, please visit michaeljfelker.com. There you can also reach me directly to submit questions or comments to be covered on the JW Review. To subscribe to this podcast, please go to iTunes and search for the JW Review.